Businessman and North Charleston mayoral candidate John Singletary says it's time for the city to get a new administration. He tells me what issues he'll tackle if he's elected mayor for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. John Singletary, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks again for inviting me, Quintin. It's always a pleasure to meet with you.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are a businessman and now a mayoral candidate for the city of North Charleston. And I know that you told me in the last interview that I did with you that you basically are pushing the administration to do things that they never did before, such as change in the way they're hiring people and etc. Let me ask you this, John. What are you pushing the administration to do right now?
I'm pushing the administration for 2023 to leave and allow a new administration to come in. As far as the way they're governing now, we're pushing them to make sure that there's parity among hiring, among contracts. We're pushing them to make sure that there's affordable housing, that the crime rate is lower. Those are the things that we're pushing them for right now, and we'll continue to push in the future.
And I'm going to talk about all of that in just a second. But you also mentioned in the interview with me a couple of months ago that you said that there's a great amount of high housing in North Charleston. Where exactly is that in the city of North Charleston?
Well, if you take a look at the city hall itself, right behind City Hall, there's been new housing that's been built, and it's astronomically high for the average income in North Charleston. When you take a look at Watson Hill, new subdivision over off of 61. From 700 to 1,000 new houses will be built, homes will be built out there, and they're outside of the price range for the average citizen in North Charleston. When you take a look going down Rivers Avenue, new homes being built off of the interstate, new homes being built in Dorchester County, new homes being built. And all of these homes are outside of the average income when it comes to North Charleston citizens. Now, we want progress, absolutely, but we want the entire community to be able to move forward and ascend as the city grows. We already know that there's a huge disparity between the average income for whites and blacks in North Charleston, and that's reflected in the contracts that the city gives as well as the employment, where African Americans are getting 30% of the jobs but only 15% of the pay. That's simply wrong. We, again, want the entire city to be able to move forward as progress comes.
Now, what is the average income for the African American resident in the city of North Charleston?
Average income is from $24,000 to $30,000 for the average African American, $66,000 for the average Caucasian. A huge disparity.
So where exactly is affordable housing in the city?
There's little affordable housing in the city. The areas that you look at now are the traditionally black areas, Murray Hill, Ackerby, Union Heights, which are all vastly changing, because if you take a look, even those areas, the city is now allowing businesses to come in. Union Heights, for instance, you're talking about an area where $35,000, $40,000 on a home versus $180,000 homes now being built. What that's going to do is not only jack the tax base for those who are still left there, but it is also going to create a situation where they cannot afford to stay in their own neighborhoods. Even Bennett Yard Road, they put homes in. So everywhere you go, and in there, there's this, the disparity is so blatant. For instance, on Bennett Yard Road, the new homes being built, the utilities are underground, versus the older community, their homes, it's above ground utilities. And so why not spend some of the money that the city has, or in order to partner with these developers to put all of the utilities underground, so that you don't have two separate neighborhoods within the same area.
Okay, what is the tax base down, and I was just running through that area yesterday on my running route, Union Heights?
It's changing. Taxes in Union Heights for the homes that are there would traditionally probably run in terms of the taxes, $1,500. Well, new homes coming in, you're talking about $5,000. That's a huge difference to a person who's already scrapped and operating off of a salary that is the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the average salaries for the city.
What are the average salaries for the city?
Well, for North Charleston, the average runs, right at about $50,000, $55,000. But again, that's considering the $66,000 on the high end and the $24,000 on the low end.
Now, and I've seen some of those houses in that area because that's my part of my running route. But how many new homes have been added to Union Heights in the past year?
Ooh, in the past year, I don't know the exact number because they continually build, but at least 15 new homes have been added in Union Heights, and of course, it's enough to change the tax base. I've walked in those homes that are new homes there, extremely small,
Yeah.
not built on the high end, and for the price per square foot, when you take a look at those homes' price per square foot, you actually get more on a price per square foot on what they're selling those homes for in Union Heights than you would in Everson Estates, than you would in Whitehall, than you would in Pepper Hill, than you would in Dorchester Wayland. So the price per square foot on those homes, it's astronomical, much higher than the price per square foot for the homes that are already there. And the only way for that to occur is that you have to have a developer, a contractor who comes in and says, I'm willing to take a risk and build a home that's much higher than the average price per square foot. So the chances of it selling is going to be minimal. They come in and take that risk. Then you've got a bank who's willing to say, I'm going to loan you money rather than the average $35, $40 per square foot. You're going to get $300 a square foot on this house. That is very uncommon. Then you've got to have to the table as well as the bank and the contractor. Normally there's a nonprofit that seeps down some federal funds, and there's an employer who's willing to hire people who will live there. And then you have the most critical piece of that puzzle, which is the city, who will allow permits in order to do that. Now, what you have then is you have the recipe for gentrification. And that's what we have that's going on there. You have to have those individuals. You have to have the contractor, you have the nonprofit, you have the bank, you have the employer, and you have the city. All five of them must get together in order to bake that cake or to make it happen in order for gentrification. And that's what you have that's going on Union Heights. And a lot of other places in the city.
And I'm gonna get back to that in a second. But who's the nonprofit organization that's sitting at the table with these developers to basically, as you say, gentrify these neighborhoods?
There's a couple, but by and large, it's Metanoia. By and large, it's Metanoia. Metanoia receives about 95% of all of the community development block grant funds that the city partners with the county in order to apply for and receive. It is the mayor of the city that determines what nonprofit gets that. Now, there are a few other dollars, like for sidewalks that went to Davis and Floyd and that kind of thing, but by and large, the lion's share goes to Metanoia. Now, what Metanoia is doing is they are using CDBG funds, the Community Development Block Grant funds, that really should go to the citizens in the city. Because if you remember the redlining that occurred, that redlining removed African Americans from the pool of funds to actually purchase houses years ago. I actually grew up on a redlining street. We had a wall, 8-foot block wall that went down our street that separated our community from the community that could get those funds. And so the Fair Housing Act comes along and says that what we're going to do is we're going to now give funds to make this thing right, because the government cannot be involved in discrimination. So we're going to give the fair housing community development block grant funds so that the people who were discriminated against can now be made whole. Those were African Americans discriminated against. The city takes those funds, gives to Metanoia. Metanoia takes those funds and purchases homes in the name of Metanoia, not pass the funds on to those individuals so that they can either purchase homes or repair homes. They take the funds and they use them within their own organization to strengthen the Metanoia organization by purchasing homes. Then they go further by taking vouchers for those African Americans that they receive, and now in order to pay rents to Metanoia, so that they double dip on federal funds. It is simply wrong to do it, and it's unfortunate, but years down the road, they'll sell those properties for an astronomical amount when they should have actually been funds that were used for the African American community.
Okay, let me break all of this down. How much of the CDBG funds, and I'm saying it wrong, were supposed to go to obviously, for instance, Junior Heights, which is right next door to Metanoia?
Mm-hmm. When we take a look at the requirement that used to be there, and we look at the CAPERS report, it's a consolidated annual performance evaluation report that you can go, anyone can go to the county's website and take a look at it. Metanoia used to put on that report that the people that they were helping, based on guidelines, were 100% African American. And the reason why is because it was only the African Americans who were discriminated against. And so their rationale was, since we are helping African Americans, we can continually get those funds and say that they're being used for their benefit. And so now the rules have been somewhat relaxed, so not 100% will actually go to African Americans based on guidelines, but Metanoia is still, the lion's share is saying that they are helping the African American community because they realize that it is that community that should benefit from those funds.
Okay, so the funds are not going to the African American communities. Where exactly are they going?
They're going into assets for Metanoia. Assets for Metanoia that they will benefit from and later on have the ability to sell off, get rich, and leave the community.
What exactly will they sell off in your mind?
They will sell the homes off. As businesses come in or as the community grows, there's equity that will grow in that community. And as they sell the house at a much higher price, they will actually receive the profits and move on. If you notice recently, not only did Cummins give $1 million for Metanoia to be used, and they're using it in that community, the African American community, but in addition to that, the city continually gives over and over and over funds to Metanoia every single year. And those funds also are being used to buy up property and houses in the African American community. That's another form of gentrification because African Americans are not owning those properties. And so at any time, Metanoia is in the position of jacking the rent. And we know from the study that was done, City of Charleston, North Charleston, and the county, the study that they really just did on housing, that study says that eventually in North Charleston, the rents for a 2-bedroom, they're going to go up to $1,900 a month. So if Metanoia were to jack their rents up at 19, immediately it's like a tsunami. It comes in, washes out the African Americans that are in their residence and allow it now for people who can pay much more to come in, which happens not to be the African Americans. And so they are hitting the African American communities on all sides and at different levels. And some it is occurring now, some will occur later, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
Where is it happening right now, Mr. Singletary?
Mm-hmm. Union Heights. If you go look, where Appleton Avenue, I go on that all throughout Union Heights, particularly if you go it is if you go off of Acabee. Before you get down Appleton Avenue, you drive on down. There's street there that has an in Dorchester Whaler, in Bennett Yard Road. When you take a look at Dorchester Whaler, I mean, almost every African American community that has been poised to protect itself, the city is allowing these organizations to come in, and they're partnering with them. And I say partnering with them because they are heavily involved with metanoia, as well as they are giving the permit. Let's take a look at Sumner Avenue over near Attaway. There are homes that are being built on lots where you have 4 and 5 on one lot that has been subdivided. These are homes that are less than 5 feet apart, structures less than 5 feet apart. That's totally against the normal code. But when you allow a planned development, you allow a PUD, then they can change the rules. When you look down at the one, if a fire were to happen in those communities, the entire thing would burn because there is no sprinkler system that's required in there, like many are required up north when you have such a PUD where houses are so close together. But it jeopardizes the safety of the people living in those communities. But it's all about the money. And again, we don't mind progress, but everyone must be able to benefit and do it in a safe way.
Okay, let me break that down, John. What is the current rent that is right now in Union Heights?
Union Heights rent used to run around $600 a month. There are places in there now that you get $1,200 to $1,400 a month. Yes. And so people are having to move out. And that's not just in Union Heights. It's all over the city that affordable housing is on a runaway course where they are using this. It's a part and parcel of the methods that they're using to gentrify. The housing study that I told you about, that housing study says it should be at least 30% of the person's income used to go towards housing. Many of our citizens who are in North Charleston are paying 50 and 60% of their income to use towards housing. But that is the push to help gentrify it. When we take a look even at the push by the Department of Transportation to come in and through right-of-way, and which is the same as eminent domain, but they're actually pushing African American out of the communities being used. 31 communities, 31, all of them are affecting African American communities. And what they're doing is they're coming in and through right-of-way, claiming they need capacity, affecting these African American communities by buying up the property, and what they're giving them for the property is not going to be enough for them to stay in North Charleston. In fact, what the city did was the city ended up coming in, and the African American communities, they rezoned the property such that commercial, multifamily properties were zoned single family. Single family being the cheapest, so now DOT can come in, purchase that property, and for a cheap amount, save DOT and pull out almost $2 billion in equity out of the African American community that they will not receive. And as a result, that's another form of a method they're using to gentrify. And so that's why I say they're hitting them at all sides.
Now, how many properties have DOT purchased in these neighborhoods thus far?
I'm not sure. We've been in contact with DOT and going back and forth. Joy Riley is the person that I've been mostly communicating with. And with that, they purchased several. I don't know exactly how many because it's an ongoing process. But My contact with them has been through the Racial Justice Network, Elder James Johnson, who has been instrumental in trying to get, in addition to more money for them, to also get additional services when they're uprooted out of their community.
What services would be ideal for them?
For instance, if you've got a community that is uprooted and moved that used to have a grocery store, we have areas with food deserts that used to have a library, or used to have a gas station, or used to have a convenience store, used to have a laundromat. Those kinds of things are services that would be greatly needed in the new location they're going to. So if you're going to establish a new community, make sure that those kinds of services, bus line, you could be moved from where you were to a new area that's not on a bus line. Those kinds of things are critical to the people that live in those communities. And so those are the kinds of things that we've been at the table trying to make sure that aren't swept away from the community.
Mr. Singletary, do you feel when we actually talk about the grocery store, that is, do you feel that unfortunately after gentrification, do you believe that a grocery store will eventually come to Union Heights or somewhere else?
Absolutely, probably a Whole Foods grocery store. It's unfortunate, but you can take a look at historically when areas are gentrified, or when you see Whole Foods going into an area. Unfortunately, it's an area that has been gentrified, and as a result, now you have some of the best quality of fruits, vegetables that come into the community. In this case, there is no grocery store at all. The mayor has promised, even if he were to use city funds to build it. Now, $1 million was given to him to build a grocery store, and he took the funds and diverted to do something else because no grocery store was built. And that was $1 million to be put in an FDIC insured institution, not a credit for anything. The money has disappeared. No grocery store. That's disingenuous. And so that's something that has to be addressed, but it will only be addressed in a new administration.
Now, where do you think that the money allegedly went to?
Well, I know it didn't go into an FDIC insured institution because through FOIA I've requested that information, and the city has failed and refused to give it because it does not exist. Much like the money from the Weed and Seed program that went to some of his friends, went to organizations outside of the targeted area, I can only assume that the money has not gone for its intended purpose, which is the grocery store, and that it has not benefited the community that it was targeted to benefit. I've asked several of the council people to check on it, and thus far I have not gotten a response in terms of what happened to the money. I've requested through FOIA to find out from the city, much like I did with the federal government to find out the information on Weed and Seed. For this situation, there's no federal program that I could FOIA to receive it because a private organization gave it to the city, and the city is the only one who has access to what happened to that.
And I hope to get Mr. Keith Sumner, the mayor of North Charleston, to get his side of the story as well. But let me ask you, where exactly was the grocery store proposed in certain areas of North Charleston?
It was proposed off of Rivers Avenue, right near the Navy Base Hospital. When the situation happened with the Navy Base in Chicora Gardens, a company gave $1 million and actually requested permits to build the grocery store, and the city denied them the permit to build it. So it goes further than just giving the money, but plans were submitted to, or requests to get a permit to build the grocery store, and the mayor and the council voted to deny the permit and maintain a food desert in that neighborhood. And so it's It's diabolical, is what it is.
Where else are the food deserts located in North Charleston?
Well, we just recently acquired a new food desert. Is food table out that was there has gone out. So those individuals either have to go all the way up to the food line, going towards Ashley Phosphate, or down to the one towards Leeds Avenue,
Right.
which leaves a huge hole. But as we know, a lot of people from Liberty Hill, Ferndale would go to that Save-A-Lot. And so, again, we're impacting the areas that are predominantly African American. And the fact that when you try and remove sustenance, food from an area in an attempt to get them to move out, it is more than just doing the wrong thing. It's diabolical. It is a situation where it's egregious, and the public should have something to say.
And yeah, I'm running out of time. The Zoom is only giving me 10 minutes. But quickly, let me ask you this: how many permits were metanoia given to by the city of North Charleston in the past year?
Not sure, but I know that they have at least permits for building. They built several houses in the Chicora, Cherokee area,
Right.
in other areas where it requires a permit from the city, and they're using local funds, city funds, and federal funds in order to do it.
And what is that
One would
all?
be too much.
Too much. Speaking of too much, how much is that all together when you think about the federal and the city and the local funds?
Recently, or let me say the last time that I researched it and took a look at it, it was over 10 million. And when we take a look at ongoing, like the Cummins that gave another million, the city that continually, it is a never-ending stack of cash that is being dumped into Metanoia in order for them to assist the city with gentrifying. Not only gentrifying by running people out, but also, as we just spoke about, the grocery stores not being built in the community. During COVID, the mayor and administration stopped people from working at the city. And it's unfortunate because, we have a situation where more has been spent on lawsuits dealing with personal promiscuity for the mayor than many of the salaries for individuals that's been laid off. And that's just wrong.
How many people did the city lay off during COVID have actually returned back to work?
I don't know. We've asked for the information through FOIA, and we've been denied. We've been denied the information.
And quickly, who else is the mayor? Well, the city of North Charleston that is partnering with when it comes to obviously, those CBDG funds and obviously, new homes and whatnot.
Davis and Floyd. They partnered with Davis and Floyd. Davis and Floyd had contracts. What happens is every 4 years, right before it's time to have the elections, they'll come in African American neighborhoods and they'll actually put in new sidewalks in hopes that everybody will be happy. We're getting a new sidewalk. They can say, well, we're doing things in the community. And some of those CDBG funds are being used to put in new sidewalks. Davis and Floyd, which is an engineering company, is getting the contract for sidewalks. Doesn't make sense. And then they subcontract it out rather than allowing those contracts to go to the people who are actually doing the work. So it puts another layer in there of fat where profits are raked off, and even with the sidewalks, we don't get the full benefit.
Now, who are they allegedly subcontracting this out to?
Well, they've subcontracted out to local organizations, which is good, in order to build the sidewalks. I don't know of any of the contractors directly, but when I go and I take a look at the implementation plan for the city, and I see the amount of money that's being put out in contracts that are going directly to people like Davis and Floyd, and then they go and get the subcontracts. It leads me to believe that they are not being above board with assigning the contracts, particularly when you take a look at the sole source contracts that they are doing, that some of them are illegal because, and I say that because if you sole source a contract, that means that there's no one else that has that ability in order to perform that contract. And we've seen several situations where they've taken a sole source contract and to give it to someone else who was in existence and applied during the time that the first one was given. So that says that it's not being done in a fair manner.
And I just got 5 minutes left, but how many of those contracts have the city given out?
Don't know
Okay.
particularly because it's not listed. I've requested all of this information before you, and the city has a knack of simply denying FOIA requests. I go into City Hall to the meetings and ask for information, and they just flat out deny it.
Let me quickly get your opinion on this. The city is planning to create a 24/7 real-time surveillance center that will monitor, according to the city, every inch of the city, unquote. As of April of this past year, the plan for the so-called Joint Operations Center will include the purchase of 745 surveillance cameras, 34 automatic license plate readers, a data dashboard for compiling surveillance feeds from privately and publicly owned cameras, and walls of video monitors. Let me ask you this. Could this lead to criminalization of gentrifying communities?
Of course, and if it's done incorrectly, yes, it will. And we already know that the city has no intentions on instituting fair methods and procedures when it comes to the entire city. We have cameras right now in the city. Gaynor Avenue, for instance, in Montague, has a camera up. The light flashes in a black neighborhood to give them the impression that the video surveillance is going on and that it is protecting them. I had a cousin that died under that camera. When I went to the city to ask them for a copy of it, the response I received was that it is there, it is blinking, but the city was not willing to pay for the service to get the recording. And so there's no recording. It's just a dummy camera that is being used to fool the public.
Who's paying for the service, Mr. Singletary?
For that one, no one's paying. The city's not willing to pay. But I'm sure there are other areas in which the city, they're willing to pay. You cannot have a selective process where you exclude citizens based on socioeconomic status when it comes to their safety. That is just wrong.
I got 30 seconds, but why didn't the city hold any public hearings about this so-called Joint Operations Center?
Because there's intent to be disingenuous with its application.
And I hope to get you back in November to talk more about this and some other issues regarding the city of North Charleston. But for now, North Charleston mayoral candidate and businessman John Singletary, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Have a great day.
You too.